Tidra is a nurse practitioner and an assistant professor at UAB School of Nursing. And Tidra's here to talk about something that I know us at AL.com and a lot of people have been talking about and got a lot of questions about, which is face masks, and specifically your children in face masks. Now, if you are in the city limits of Birmingham, face masks are required for everybody over the age of 2 when you go into a public place and you can't maintain your distance. And same with airlines. They're requiring most are requiring children 2 and up to wear a face mask or a face covering during a flight. So most of you know, if you've ever been around a 2 or 3-year-old, that sounds extremely daunting to have to make sure that your toddler has got a face mask on, is keeping it on, and is not grabbing everything and putting their hands in their mouth. So we're going to talk about that today, along with adults in face masks as well with Tidra. So if you've got questions, please let us know. I'll be monitoring them here, and we will try to answer your questions. So Tidra, let's just start out by saying what you believe about the face mask, if they're really important for children, and what you have seen with children, especially in that 2 to 4, 2 to 5 range, wearing face masks.
Okay, first I would like to say I do think the masks are important because, as most of you have heard in the news, people with the virus can be asymptomatic and not be aware that they have the virus. So it's important that we wear something over our mouths and nose to keep others from getting infected, because the virus can be spread through coughing, through just general conversation speaking. So it's important that we keep it covered. And children are just as at risk as adults. So having something over the nose and mouth is going to keep us all well, which is the reason why the ruling of maintaining the social distancing as well as wearing the mask is so important. So having those candid conversations with those younger children are going to be very important, allowing them to kind of play with the face mask before you require them to actually go out in public and need to use it, allowing them to ask as many questions as they would like to. And sometimes you have to be willing to explain this over and over again, just because that's the way their little young mind work, not really understanding. Also, maybe possibly relating it to something that they're used to. Most children in that age group have been in some type of daycare setting, Mother's Day Out, or some type of church daycare program. And so they're used to hearing about germs, or having to cover their cough and wash their hands. So if you can relate it to something that they may be used to, it will increase the likelihood that they'll be willing to put it on when the time comes for you to go out in public.
And I love a comment that we've got here from Renee, and she says, "Make them a cute one, and they'll love it." And
yes,
that's something, right?
Make it their favorite color, or let them pick out the fabric that's got their favorite cartoon character on it, or even take it home and bedazzle it a little bit. Put gemstones on it for the little girls. Let the little boys put little stickers or things on it, and they'll fall in love with it and be willing to wear it. She's absolutely correct.
You've got to make it less scary. Is that right?
Make it less frightening. Make it less frightening. It's kind of scary. You know, imagine being 2 or 3-year-old walking outside and everybody you see have their face covered up and you can only see their eyes. That's pretty scary. And then putting it on themselves, you know, that's pretty scary for someone that age. So make it less frightening by letting them get involved. Make it a family activity. And then they'll be more likely to wear it. And that's why it's important to introduce them to the mask prior to needing them to wear the mask, so they can get used to it. Put it on their favorite stuffed animals. Show them pictures of other children with the mask on, so that it will be less frightening.
Right. And just to address some of our comments we're getting, I know that, again, keep in mind that these face masks, especially for 2 and up, are required in the city limits of Birmingham. They are also required on airlines. If you've got to do any traveling, you've got to take your children and adults with you. Everybody has to have on a mask while you are on that flight. Yes. And I know when I went to Birmingham Shuttlesworth Airport last week, you have to have them on even in the terminal.
Yes.
Now, when you're flying, we're coming up on Memorial Day weekend. We probably will have some people traveling, both driving and flying. Now, how do you on a flight, or if you have to go through a city or pass through a city that requires a mask, how do you ensure, especially that your children keep those masks on while they're in a public spot?
So I think if you can make it as comfortable as possible for them, and so it helps with the allowing them to pick the colors and allowing them to help make the mask. but also the elastic around the ears can get a little irritating. So if you could put a hat on, sew some buttons on the side of the hat where you can put the elastic over the hat, or make the mask that has the tie straps on it, or make it a game, make it into a game, and let's see how long you can keep your mask on to keep it to kind of entertaining for the child. They're going to be more likely to keep that mask on. And if everyone else in the family, the adults that are with them, have their mask on, they're going to be more likely to keep it on.
I think that's interesting what you said about the hat. I know that I made a video, I'll link it here below, on how to make a bandana mask with the elastics that go around your ears. But like you said, some of, especially our children, they've got smaller heads, smaller ears than us, and they're a little more sensitive. So if those elastics are hurting your children's ears, you make a great point about sewing a button on a cap, maybe above the ears, and hooking that elastic on the button.
You could also use a headband, or if you have anything that you can tie around the head, you can sew a bow on and put it on there so it's not as irritating behind their ears and it feels a little bit more comfortable. Making sure that it fits snug around the nose and mouth is very important. As long as it's fitting snug around there to cover it up, you're perfect.
Got it. Now let's talk too about, I know you mentioned adults. The kids are maybe more likely to do it if they're the adults in their family or their caregivers are also wearing a mask. So talk about what we talked about before we went live about the importance of wearing a mask if you're going into a public place where you can't maintain your social distancing, whether that's a child or an adult or just a person in general. How is that important, whether your city is requiring that, like Birmingham, or whether they aren't?
Well, one of the things that we've all seen in the news lately is that there can be asymptomatic carriers of the virus. So coronavirus doesn't always have symptoms. Sometimes the symptoms are mild in children. It may be similar to a cold where they just have a cough or a low-grade fever and not real symptoms that makes you think of coronavirus. So it's very important that we wear masks because we're uncertain if we have it, and then other people as well. And sometimes you're in places like pharmacy, grocery stores, or even going to your doctor's appointment where you're just not able to maintain that 6 feet social distancing. So you need to put the mask on to not only protect yourself, but the other person, because you may have the virus and not even be aware because you could be asymptomatic. So it's important for adults as well as children, because children can have the virus as well.
Something that I think was really interesting that you mentioned as well is that children might exhibit different symptoms if they do have the virus rather than adults, and that those symptoms that the children could be presenting could resemble more of a cold or a cough, and a caregiver might not know that child has the virus because the symptoms might not line up with what adults have.
Correct. They may be much more milder symptoms, like I said, like a cough that you're used to having. The thing to keep in mind is monitoring how often you've gone out in public. If you've been in contact with anyone that has been recently diagnosed with the virus, have you traveled out of state? Kind of think about all of those things. And is your child acting their usual way when they have a cold is very important. But when in doubt, always seek out your primary care provider's office and ask them their recommendation as far as if you should go get testing or come into their office. So it's very, very important. Anytime you see those symptoms, just because of what's going on, I would touch bases with my primary care provider and get their recommendation for the next step. And it could be seasonal allergies, it could be a cold, but you want to make absolutely sure, just because of these uncertain times related to the coronavirus.
Right. And something too that I know we mentioned is kids, and I think even adults as well. I'm guilty of touching things and then touching my face, just not thinking about it. It's a habit that probably needs to be broken either way regarding pandemic or not. But kids especially are a lot more apt to touch things and then put their hands in their mouth, or touch things, touch their face, and not have that, that thought that, oh, I shouldn't, whatever I touched might have something on it that doesn't need to go in my mouth. Sometimes they don't have that train of thought. So how do you talk to your children and say, hey, especially right now, this is something that we've really got to watch out for?
I think just having those very candid conversations with your children. Like I said, the younger ones is a little bit harder, but 5 and older, they usually have been in a school setting. They're used to washing their hands, and they're used to the germ talk. So I think repeating it over and over again, being mindful to watch your child when you're out, that they're not touching things. Keep wet wipes or things in your pocket that you can easily pull out and use to clean their hands, hand sanitizer, because more than likely the younger age group, they're going to eventually touch something. The older kids, as long as you constantly remind them, remember, we're going in the store, you're not supposed to touch anything, and you're supposed to keep your mask on. If you have those conversations and repeat it over and over again, they're more likely to follow what you've instituted. And like I said, sometimes with the younger kids, if you can make a game of it, if you can take their stuffed animal and let them put a mask on their stuffed animal, they're going to be more likely to comply and remember, oh, I'm not supposed to touch anything. Oh, I'm supposed to keep my mask on. It's really hard for me because I'm used to touching my face as well. So constantly reminding them the importance of not touching.
Well, and also, again, that's not just kids. I know that I've gone to the grocery store with my husband and I'm just cringing because I'm like, please stop touching everything.
Yeah.
You've got to stop.
Yeah.
So that's not just children, it's adults too.
It's adults as well. I have to remind myself, oh, I can't touch that. Oh, I can't touch my face. My face is itching, but I can't touch it right now.
I know.
So it's a constant battle when I go to the grocery store.
Right. And if you're somebody like me, summer starting, I am that person that gets eaten alive by mosquitoes. You are constantly wanting to touch your body. And that is something that we're going to have to deal with coming up. Now, here's an interesting thought from one of our commenters named Mary. She said that I don't think it's the kids that are afraid of the mask. It's when the adults show being afraid or upset about a mask, that can rub off. And Mary, I think you've got a great point.
She has an excellent point. That is true. When parents show anxiety and stress, it does tend to rub off on their children, and children can actually see that, and they may display it a little bit different, but she's absolutely correct. Kids can sense when their parents are stressed or upset, and it does rub off on them, and they usually tend to whine and cry. Those are things they typically display when they're stressed and have anxiety related to it. So the more you can talk about it, the more common, honest answers you can give, and try to remain calm during those conversations, the more likely you are, as well as the child, to not have stress and anxiety related to it.
Mm-hmm. Got another interesting comment from Carly, and she's just saying that, she feels like she's seen parents that are afraid to take their kid out because they don't want to have these conversations about the virus, about masks, things like that. So what do you say to those parents who haven't had candid conversations with their children about what is happening? How do you, as a parent, explain to your children what's going on? And, if we go out, we've got to follow these certain rules. And do you think that you should do that, have those candid conversations, or do you think that you should just not mention it to your children if you don't go outside?
I think it does our kids a disservice by not taking them outside and by not having those conversations. It's important for children to be around other children, but maintaining the social distancing. But it's important for them to get out. It's important for you to get reliable information. The CDC has wonderful information. UAB has wonderful information that gives you correct information. I think sometimes in the news we get oversensitized and we don't know what's true and what's not true. So I think going to a reputable source, getting the correct information, and having those candid conversations, because we can't hold our children inside forever. They're going to need to get out. They're going to be around other kids. They're going to be around other adults. So it's important that they understand why they need to wear the mask and why they need to make sure they don't touch anything and wash their hands and be mindful of that. So I think it's a disservice not to have those candid conversations. I do, however, understand it can be tough. I'm a mom myself, and so I do have to repeatedly tell my 5-year-old why he has to wear a mask and why he can't touch anything, but I also see the value in allowing him to sometimes go to the grocery store with me and making sure we go out to the park and go on nature walks, because he needs that as well to develop the way he should be developing at his age. So it's important. I know it's hard, but get reliable information, and maybe sometimes not watching the television when it's information that you feel like may be scary, and making sure the information comes from you. And once again, that it's honest, and then it's very candid, and explain it as many times as you have to for them to understand.
And that's great advice. I'm not a parent. I have not had to have that conversation with a child, but I can absolutely sympathize with anybody who has had
Oh,
to.
yes.
And parents are superheroes for sure. Good question here. Are there any types of masks that are more suited for children?
Not necessarily. The one thing I would say is making sure you get involved in making the mask. They're all made the same way because they all need to fit snug around the nose as well as the mouth. And so the thing to make it more childlike is to let them pick their favorite color, bedazzle it, and make them get involved in the process of picking the fabric that they want to use. But otherwise, the style and the way they're made are the same for adults as well as children. And that's because it needs to fit snug around the nose as well as the mouth.
What do you say, and I say this because I've seen it even personally, and I've seen this actually more with adults than children, to those people who maybe have masks on but have them below their nose. Have you seen that? And what do you say to those people who are wearing a mask but wearing it below their nose?
Yes, I have seen that, and it really defeats the purpose of wearing the mask. You really need to cover your nose as well as your mouth, because people can be close to you speaking and you can inhale, and that's the point of wearing the mask, because you can transmit it through your nose or through your mouth. So that's the importance of keeping it covered. I understand once you get away from the people, if you want to pull it down, that's important if you're further than 6 feet away from people. But if you're more than 6 feet, you need to put the mask over your nose as well as your mouth. Otherwise, you're not doing yourself any benefits, or the person you're coming in contact with any benefits by having it on but not covering up your nose.
So that less than 6 feet number is very important. If you're 6 feet or less, that's something that I know, like I said before, Birmingham is requiring that along with airlines. Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport here in Birmingham. Quick note, if any of y'all are traveling for Memorial Day and going through the airport, again, that is required. But keep in mind, I know that Tidra said keep hand sanitizer, wipes, things like that on you and on your bag. Keep in mind, TSA is allowing larger sizes of hand sanitizer to come through security in your carry-on. So we all know that 3-ounce rule that we hear all the time over the loudspeaker at the airport. That is not the case for hand sanitizer right now. You can bring a larger bottle with you and your purse and your carry-on on the plane if you're traveling through the airport and you need it. They also, at the airport that I visited last week here in Birmingham, they also said you can wear your mask through the TSA checkpoint, which is an important point. They just ask that when they are verifying your identity, that you pull it down to show who you are. You can stay 6 feet away from the person at the ticket counter, or at the desk rather, and then you can pull it back on while you're going through the belt and through security to make sure that they know who you are, and while they're checking your bags, you are staying safe. And that is a requirement here at Birmingham Shuttlesworth and on airlines while you're flying. Is there anything else, Tidra, that we have forgotten or that you think is important that we haven't gone over?
I just think in general, having candid conversations about germs, not only in regards to COVID, but flu and common coughs, they're transmitted the same way. So always preaching good hand washing, remembering to take hand sanitizers and wipes, and trying to not touch things as often as you can is important. And it's not just for COVID-19, but as well as the flu and your common colds that we see all the time. So always having that conversation about health prevention and preventing viruses spreading are very, very important for this population. So don't be afraid to have those candid conversations. There's lots of good information on reputable websites that give you great information to share with your children and tells you how to have those conversations. And when in doubt, don't hesitate to reach out to your primary care provider for your child. They have lots of recommendations. They've lived through, treating children with cough, colds, and they have lots of information they can share with you about how to have this conversation with your child and the importance of it.
Awesome, Tidra. Thank you so much for all of your information. Welcome. If y'all have any questions for Tidra, please let me know and I will pass them along. And we appreciate it. I know that you are very busy and this is a very busy time for everybody working in the healthcare profession. So thank you so much, Tidra. And for everybody else watching, we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.